the same time, Multichoice has hit back at the convicted Facebook rapist Thabo Bester and Dr. Magudumana. The entertainment giant says Bester's prison escape caught both media and the public's attention. Therefore, it is important that members of the public see the 4-part documentary. Media platform Showmax insists the docu meets all the standards of ethical journalism. Now, for more on what the law has to say in this instance, we're joined by William Bird, who is the Director of Media Monitoring Africa and legal analyst and managing director of Bird and Melusi Xulu. Gentlemen, thank you to you both for joining me this evening on News at Prime. William Bird, let's just start with you, having covered a lot of this stuff in the media as well. Firstly, does Thabo Bester and his co-accused Dr. Magudumana have a leg to stand on, considering how widely reported this case has been?
Well, it's not so much whether they've got a leg to stand on, it's more about the fact that if they are making allegations in this particular documentary, journalists, as they adhere to and as we heard in the clip, if this is a piece of journalism, they have to make sure that they facilitate a right of reply. So they, we would assume, have taken measures and steps in making of the documentary to ensure that the other side was heard in respect of whatever kind of allegations and issues that they are seeking to address. Beyond that, and unless they happen to know that for a fact that they are sharing things, they don't have any leg to stand on. Otherwise, it just looks like an effort to mitigate some kind of potential reputational harm.
And exactly to that, William, considering that this has not only been reported locally, but globally as well. It's been a story of public interest. It's already been out there in terms of journalism. What is the difference between it being reported in shorter formats on such programs as when it is a documentary series?
Well, exactly. I mean, even though we know that we're waiting for the trial to appear, we don't have a jury system in South Africa, so there's not going to be the kind of allegation that people are going to be biased either one way or the other, or influenced one way or the other. So, you know, it really is curious to see, or it'll be very interesting to hear what their allegations are. You know, as far as we're concerned, we should be supporting Showmax in standing by their guns and broadcasting the documentary. If there are issues with it, then there are, you know, means for them to seek redress and certainly right of reply, if that is indeed the case, that it may warrant that.
Mr. Xulu, just coming to you here on this, just to discuss the legalities. I mean, Dr. Magudumana says the documentary will cause irreparable harm. I mean, some might argue that ship has already sailed, but in terms of the law, does she have a case?
Good evening to you, Martha, and to my fellow guest, William, and to the viewer at home. Well, what is important at this point is how much harm has she already suffered? Is it really harm, though, when it's something that is out there, it's in public, globally and locally, you know? The issue would be what is stated in the documentary, is it true or not? Because once it's not the truth, obviously, she can then say there's a defamation of character. But we've not seen her raising that. What I've heard from her attorney while she was interviewed is that she will also suffer a right to fair trial. Now, let us separate the two. There's what you call trial by media, and as William said correctly, we don't have a jury system. But trial by media is not necessarily what happens in courts. It's just something that the public will have a perception on, but it doesn't go to court. So already the trial is ready to be started in court. And I think somewhere in June they're going to have a pre-trial. So they're probably not even going to use the documentary. It's just a perception in the public that will be there. So I think what is more important than anything is for them to worry about preparing for the trial and not focus on the things that are on the outside, because what is most important is the evidence that will be used in court, not the documentary, which is obvious, as I said, trial by media or trial by social media.
And Mr. Xulu, would you say that Showmax does have the legal right to then broadcast this documentary while the court case is still ongoing? Are there any examples of other high-profile cases where the court case continued, but then there was a documentary on the side? I mean, like we were talking earlier, also saying with William Bird, to say this has been extensively covered already anyway.
Yeah. Well, firstly, our Constitution allows for freedom of expression. If you go to Section 16, subsection 1, it says you have a right to freedom of press, you have a right to freedom of receiving and imparting information, and lastly, you have a right for artistic creativity. So that will be their constitutional right. And obviously, it will be an issue of public interest versus private rights of Dr. Nandiba and Thabo Bester. But the examples that I know about that I've checked, you have the Senzo Meyiwa case, the Netflix documentary. It was happening even before the trial started. But interestingly so, there was also a documentary for Oscar Pistorius. Remember, his case started in 2014. In 2014, there was already a documentary. So those examples show that there can be a documentary once the trial is happening.
William, you know, talking about using the courts as well, of course, it's everyone's legal right to seek legal action or legal advice in any way whatsoever. But do you find that when it comes to the media, sometimes there are certain characters who use the courts to abuse their freedom of speech to try and silence these kinds of stories or have a hand in the narrative of how they are shaped? Because they're saying that they want to see this 4-part docu before it even airs to be able to give them the thumbs up.
I mean, that would be an extraordinary step for any broadcaster to take to, you know, show something to the parties concerned.
Yeah.
Imagine if, you know, when the Gupta leaks were about to be released, that they decided, oh, we better show these to the Guptas just in case they might be upset about the content of these things. You know, that would have been simply untenable. And this is a similar kind of an idea, right? Where it can get very interesting is depending on who they choose to or who they have interviewed in this documentary, and certainly I know very, very little about, you know, its content other than it is about Thabo Bester and the trial, is depending on who they interview, that person or those people may expose themselves to potential legal problems. So imagine if I say to you on this Zoom call here, we're talking this evening and the trial's tomorrow, and I say, well, no, actually, last night I was out partying like a rock star, whereas, in fact, in my affidavit that I've given to court, I say, no, I was at home all evening. The defense team can then use that evidence against me to say, well, funny you should say this, Mr. Bird, that in court you said in your affidavit that you were at home, whereas we saw this documentary of you saying that actually you were out partying like a rock star. Which one is it? And that can then fundamentally discredit me. So it's not so much worrying about the judge, for example, being influenced, but these kinds of documentaries can potentially, and media reports more broadly, I might add, can sometimes have a negative consequence for criminal processes and for criminal trials. So we would hope that the people that have made this documentary have been very careful to make sure that they're not exposing and causing risk to the actual court case in creating this documentary. That said, for the defendants to be asking to view it before it goes out, I mean, that's just ridiculous, and that's not going to happen. So, you know, they're going to have to watch it like the rest of us, and if they think they've got a case to make, well, then they can go to the BCCSA and they can lay a case, open a complaint there, or if they really want to, they can go to the courts like anyone else.
Yeah, well, we'll be watching this case with bated breath as usual. And thank you to you both for joining us this evening on News at Prime. Really appreciate your time and your insights.